Well, President Trump says that he's already narrowed down his list for a potential Supreme Court pick. Errol Barnett is traveling with the president in New Jersey.
President Trump arrived in New Jersey expecting to interview potential replacements for retiring Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy.
Look, I like them all. I think they're all good. But I've got it down to about 5.
CBS News has learned there are 2 leading contenders, Brett Kavanaugh, a 53-year-old circuit judge in Washington, and 46-year-old Amy Coney Barrett, who the president recently appointed to the 7th Circuit in Chicago. Also up for consideration is Amul Thapar, a 49-year-old circuit court judge in Cincinnati who would be the first Indian American to serve on the Supreme Court. The president has been expressing excitement about nominating a 2nd Supreme Court justice.
Now, I've done a good job with judges. Judge Gorsuch, Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch.
Earlier in the week, Mr. Trump highlighted his vision to reshape the High Court for decades.
We have to pick one that's going to be there for 40 years, 45 years.
And reminded supporters his judicial nominees only survive if Republicans keep control of the Senate.
We will vote to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor this fall.
Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell wants to make use of his party's razor-thin majority now because Democrats might win back control of the upper chamber after the midterm elections. Courting key votes, the president hosted 6 senators at the White House Thursday, including 3 vulnerable Democrats.
Are you ready to fight? Yeah!
This week, Democratic efforts to push off confirmation votes until next year were quickly rebuffed.
Ain't gonna happen.
Senator McConnell famously held up President Obama's Supreme Court pick, Merrick Garland, for 10 months back in 2016, citing the upcoming election. Democrats want him to do the same now.
Too close to an election. Let's let the people decide.
But McConnell rejected the comparison.
Nobody on either side has ever suggested before yesterday that the Senate should only process Supreme Court nominations in odd-numbered years.
Adding to the tension, both sides know this pick could change the balance of the court for a generation.
What's at stake is whether or not we will continue to recognize or not a woman's right to choose.
CBS News correspondent Errol Barnett joins me now from Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. Errol, I understand you have new information from the man behind the prank phone call with President Trump. What are we learning?
That's right, Rena. Our producer, Sarah Cook, just got off the phone with the man behind this prank phone call, John Melendez, who confirms that he did, in fact, on Wednesday, with his podcast producer, make an attempt to reach out to President Trump through the White House switchboard, and after a few failed attempts, was able to connect with President Trump aboard Air Force One. Melendez saying that he posed as Senator Menendez of New Jersey, and that was enough for the White House to patch through this comedian to Jared Kushner, the president's advisor and son-in-law. Melendez said he essentially posed as the senator and said he wanted to discuss immigration policy, and was surprised that 20 minutes later he got a phone call back from President Trump himself. And the podcast has posted this 4-minute conversation online, and many people have been listening to it. And Melendez says he was surprised at how easy it was for him to get through to President Trump, and how he says President Trump seemed to believe that he was the Democratic senator from New Jersey. In the phone call, you can hear President Trump congratulating who he thought was Senator Menendez on avoiding corruption charges. You hear President Trump say that he wants to deliver on a larger immigration policy solution rather than small fixes. So it certainly does sound very convincing. Melendez is essentially saying this was a practical joke, and that the Secret Service has now visited his home. He did not answer the door, and he tells us that he's in discussions with Michael Avenatti, who represents Stormy Daniels in her case with the president, should the White House decide to press charges. So this comedian saying yes, it was in fact him, and he got through to the president.
Errol, I'm curious what the White House is saying about this.
Well, this is exceedingly embarrassing for the White House, and they have not commented. In fact, they told us they won't engage on this topic, but they've also not forcefully denied it either, which we've seen with previous incidents. We did get confirmation from a person familiar with conversations that the White House on Thursday did reach out to Senator Menendez's office to flag this prank phone call to the president, to the office, to let them know that someone was posing as the senator. But it is exceedingly embarrassing for the White House because it really exposes just how easy it was for a casual comedian with a podcast to speak to the president of the United States for 4 minutes.
Yeah, it's almost unbelievable, Errol, that he was able to actually talk to President Trump, according to his account. I want to also ask you, though, a lot of buzz, obviously, on Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy retiring, announcing that retirement on Wednesday. What prompted him to retire at this specific time? Do we know yet, Errol?
Yeah, still a major decision, a major announcement, and President Trump is using this weekend to speak to potential replacements. But we don't know specifically why Justice Kennedy announced his retirement now. Historically, justices do tend to announce their retirements during the summer recess, and even though Congress is in session, it would fit with that historical precedent. And he's also served almost twice as long as what is a typical tenure on the Supreme Court of 16 years. Justice Kennedy sitting on the bench for 3 decades. And as he is 81 years old, like anyone else who is accomplished at that age, he likely wants to spend more time with his wife and family as well. But President Trump earlier this week, in speeches he made in Wisconsin, claimed that it was his discussion with Justice Kennedy and the assurances that President Trump gave him that he would be replaced with a conservative justice that ultimately tipped Justice Kennedy to make this decision. But it is certainly a consequential one.
It certainly is a consequential one. And we know that Democrats want to wait and hold off until after midterms, hoping that their numbers might be better in Congress. But what's the sense right now? What are you hearing about a potential confirmation of whoever it is the president nominates?
Well, it's a big deal because Justice Kennedy has historically been the swing vote between the more liberal and conservative wings of the Supreme Court. His decisions have helped provide rights to gay Americans toward marriage. He's also upheld abortion as well. So with his possible replacement and President Trump's commitment to replace him with a conservative justice, Democrats and liberals are concerned that perhaps this is the first step to Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion, to being overturned. So they tried to push Senate Leader Mitch McConnell to delay this confirmation vote until after the midterm elections on the slim chance that perhaps Democrats will win enough seats to gain the majority in the Senate. But Senator McConnell will have none of that. He wants this vote done this fall to secure a conservative justice on the court. And that's why President Trump met with several senators this week to gauge what would be palatable for them, what type of nominee. There are 2 pro-abortion rights Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, who have indicated they don't want to see someone overturn Roe versus Wade. Senator Collins saying that she sees it as settled law. So President Trump would be wise to appoint a justice who has not previously ruled in ways that seem negative toward Roe versus Wade, although President Trump told us on Air Force One yesterday he would not ask potential nominees specifically about their views on this issue because he felt it would be inappropriate. But we are standing by to see who he will meet here in the next few hours as a potential replacement for Justice Kennedy.
You know, a lot of talk also has been said about the Supreme Court that it's just not diverse enough, especially on an ethnic level, and you're making these decisions on people who come from a wide range of different backgrounds. Any sort of sense that he might nominate somebody who is more ethnically diverse than the current makeup of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, there is one nominee who, if confirmed, would be the first Indian American to sit on the Supreme Court, and that's Amul Thapar. He's 49 years old and currently serves on the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati. President Trump was also keen to mention that there are 2 women on his short list of possible replacements, and that includes Amy Coney Barrett. She's 46 years old and was appointed by President Trump to sit on the 7th Circuit Court there in Chicago. But President Trump has made clear in his speeches and to us yesterday on Air Force One that he wants to nominate someone who is relatively young as far as judges go, who will sit and rule on the Supreme Court for generations. So whoever he does choose, he wants that confirmation process to be swift, but he also wants to have a lasting legacy.
All right, Errol Barnett coming to us in New Jersey, traveling with the president. Errol, thank you.